you talk to folks who live in San Francisco, and there's like this bone deep feeling that like within, a year or 2 years, we're just going to be living in a world that has been transformed by AI. I'm just struck by like the geographic difference, because you go like, I don't know, 100 miles in any direction, and like that belief totally dissipates. And I have to say, as a journalist, that makes me bring my own skepticism and say like, can I really trust all the people around me? Because it seems like the rest of the world has a very different vision of how this is going to go. I'm curious what you make of that kind of geographic disconnect.
Yeah, so I've been watching this for 10 years, right? I've been in the field for 10 years, and was kind of interested in AI even before then. And my view at almost every stage up to the last few months has been, we're in this awkward space where in a few years we could have these models that do everything humans do, and they totally turn the economy and what it means to be human upside down, or the trend could stop and all of it could sound completely silly. I've now probably increased my confidence that we are actually in the world where things are going to happen. I'd give numbers more like 70 and 80% and less like 40 or 50%. Which is not
70 to 80% probability of what?
That we'll get a very large number of AI systems that are much smarter than humans at almost everything. I'd maybe 70, 80% we get that before the end of the decade, and my guess is 2026 or 2027.
Yeah.
But on your point about the geographic difference, a thing I've noticed is with each step in the exponential, there's this expanding circle of people who kind of are, again, are depending on your perspective, are either deluded cultists or grok the future.
Got it.
And I remember when it was a few thousand people, right? When you would just you'd talk to like just like super weird people who believe, and basically no one else did. Now it's more like a few million people out of a few billion, and yes, many of them are located in San Francisco, but also there were a small number of people in, say, the Biden administration. There may be a small number of people in this administration who believe this, and it drove their policy. So it's not entirely geographic, but I think there is this disconnect. And I don't know how to go from a few million to everyone in the world, right? To the congressperson who doesn't focus on these issues, let alone the person in Louisiana, let alone the person in Kenya.
Right. Well, it seems like it's also become polarized in a way that may hurt that goal. Like I'm feeling this sort of alignment happening where like caring about AI safety, talking about AI safety, talking about the potential for misuse is sort of being coded as left or liberal, and talking about acceleration and getting rid of regulations and going as fast as possible being sort of coded as right. So I don't know. Do you see that as a barrier to getting people to understand what's going on?
I think that's actually a big barrier, right? Because I think addressing the risks while maximizing the benefits, I think that requires nuance. You can actually have both, right? There are ways to surgically and carefully address the risks without slowing down the benefits very much, if at all. But they require subtlety and they require a complex conversation. Once things get polarized, once it's like we're going to cheer for this set of words and boo for that set of words, nothing good gets done. Look, bringing AI benefits to everyone, like curing, previously incurable diseases, that's not a partisan issue. The left shouldn't be against it. Preventing AI systems from, being misused for weapons of mass destruction or behaving autonomously in ways that, threaten infrastructure or even threaten humanity itself. That's not a partisan issue. That isn't something the right should be against. I don't know what to say other than that we need to sit down and we need to have an adult conversation about this that's not tied into these same old tired political fights.
It's so interesting to me, Kevin, because like historically, national security, national defense, like nothing has been more right-coded than those issues, right? But right now, it seems like the right is not interested in those with respect to AI. And I wonder if the reason, and I feel like I sort of heard this in J.D. Vance's speech in France, was the idea that, well, look, America will get there first, and then it will just win forever. And so we don't need to address any of these. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's it. And I think there's also like, if you talk to the, the Doge folks, there's this sense that all these.
Are you talking to the Doge folks?
I'm not telling you I'm talking to.
All right, fine.
Let's just say I've been getting some signal messages.
Okay.
I think there's a sense among a lot of Republicans and sort of Trump world folks in DC that the conversation about AI and AI futures has been sort of dominated by these worry warts, these sort of, Chicken Little, sky is falling doomers who just are constantly telling us how dangerous this stuff is and are constantly just like, having to sort of push out their timelines for when it's going to get really bad and it's just around the corner. And so we need all this regulation now. And they're just very cynical. I don't think they believe that people like you are sincere in your worry.
So, yeah, I think on the side of risks, I often feel that the advocates of risk are sometimes the worst enemies of the cause of risk. There's been a lot of noise out there. There's been a lot of folks saying, oh, look, you can download the smallpox virus because they think that that's a way of driving, political interest. And then, of course, the other side recognized that and they said, this is dishonest. That you can just get this on Google. Who cares about this? And so poorly presented evidence of risk is actually the worst enemy of mitigating risk. And we need to be really careful in the evidence we present. And, in terms of what we're seeing in our own model, we're going to be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we really declare that a risk is present now, we're going to come with the receipts. Anthropic, will try to be responsible in the claims that we make. We will tell you when there is danger imminently. We have not warned of imminent danger yet.
Some folks wonder whether a reason that people do not take questions about AI safety maybe as seriously as they should is that so much of what they see right now seems very silly. It's people making, little emojis or making little slop images or sort of, chatting with Game of Thrones chat bots or something. Do you think that is a reason that people
I think that's like 60% of the reason.
Really? Okay.
No. I think like, I think it relates to this present and future thing. Like people look at like, the chatbot. They're like, we're talking to a chatbot. Like, what the fuck? Are you stupid? Like, you think the chatbot's going to kill everyone? Like, I think that's how many people react. And we go to great pains to say, we're not worried about the present. We're worried about the future, although the future is getting very near right now. If you look at our responsible scaling policy, it's nothing but AI autonomy and, CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. It is about hardcore misuse and AI autonomy that could be threats to the lives of millions of people. That is what Anthropic is mostly worried about. We have everyday policies that address other things, but like the key documents, the things like the responsible scaling plan, that is exclusively what they're about, especially at the highest levels. And yet, every day, if you just look on Twitter, you're like, Anthropic had this stupid refusal, right? Anthropic told me it couldn't kill a Python process because it sounded violent. Anthropic didn't want to do X, We don't want that either. Those stupid refusals are a side effect of the things that we actually care about, and we're striving, along with our users, to make those happen less. But no matter how much we explain that, always the most common reaction is, oh, you say you're about safety. I look at your models like there are these stupid refusals. You think these stupid things are dangerous.
I don't even think it's like that level of engagement. I think a lot of people are just looking at what's on the market today and thinking like, this is just frivolous. It just doesn't matter. It's not that it's refusing my request. It's just that it's stupid, and I don't see the point of it. I guess that's probably not.
I think for an even wider set of exactly. I think for an even wider set of people, that is their reaction. And I think eventually, if the models are good enough, if they're strong enough, they're going to break through. Like some of these, research-focused models, which, we're working on one as well. We'll probably have one in not very long.
Not too many time units?
Not too many time units. Those are starting to break through a little more because they're more useful. They're more used in people's professional lives. I think the agents, the ones that go off and do things, are... that's going to be another level of it. So I think people will wake up to both the risks and the benefits to a much more extreme extent than they will before over the next 2 years. Like, I think it's going to happen. I'm just worried that it'll be a shock to people when it happens. And so the more we can forewarn people, which maybe it's just not possible, but I want to try, the more we can forewarn people, the higher the likelihood, even if it's still very low, of a sane and rational response.
I do think there's one more dynamic here, though, which is that I think people actually just don't want to believe that this is true, right? People don't want to believe that they might lose their job over this, right? People don't want to believe that, like, we are going to see a complete remaking of the global order. Like, the stuff that, the AI CEOs tell us is going to happen when they're done with their work is an insanely radical transformation. And most people hate even basic changes in their lives. So I really think that a lot of the sort of fingers in the ears that you see when you start talking to people about AI is just they actually just hope that none of this works out.
Yeah, I could actually, despite being one of the few people at the forefront of developing the technology, I can actually relate.
Yeah.
So, over winter break, as I was looking at where things were scheduled to scale within Anthropic and also what was happening outside Anthropic, I looked at it and I said, for coding, we're going to see very serious things by the end of 2025. And by the end of 2026, it might be, everything, close to the level of the best humans. And I think of all the things that I'm good at, right? I think of all the times when I wrote code, and I think of it as like this intellectual activity, and boy, am I smart that I can do this, and it's like a part of my identity that I'm like, good at this, and I get mad when others are better than I am, and then I'm like, oh my God, there are going to be these systems that and even as the one who's building this, even as one of the ones who benefits most from it. There's still something a bit threatening about it.
Yeah.
I just think we need to acknowledge that. Like it's wrong not to tell people that is coming or to try to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote in Machines of Love and Grace that you thought it would be a surprisingly emotional experience for a lot of people when powerful AI arrived, and I think you meant it in mostly the positive sense, but I think there will also be a sense of profound loss for people. I think back to Lisa Dole, the Go champion, who was beaten by DeepMind's Go playing AI, and gave an interview afterwards, and basically was very sad, visibly upset that his life's work, this thing that he had spent his whole life training for, had been eclipsed. And I think a lot of people are going to feel some version of that. I hope they will also see the good sides. But
I think on one hand, I think that's right. On the other hand, look at chess. Chess got beaten, what was it now? 27 years ago, 28 years ago, Deep Blue versus Kasparov. And, today chess players are, celebrities, as much as they were. And, we have Magnus Carlsen, right? Isn't he like a fashion model in addition to like a chess?
He was just on Joe Rogan. Yeah.
He's doing great. He's like a celebrity that we think this guy is great. We haven't really devalued him. He's probably having a better time than Bobby Fischer, another thing I wrote in Machines of Loving Grace is like there's a reconciliation here. There's a synthesis here where on the other side we kind of end up in a good place, in a much better place, and we recognize that while there's a lot of change, we're part of something greater.
Yeah. But you do have to kind of go through the steps of grieving.
It's going to be a bumpy ride. Like anyone who tells you it's not. This is why I was so. I looked at the Paris summit and being there, it kind of made me angry. But then what made me less angry is I'm like, look, how's it going to look in 2 or 3 years? These people are going to regret what they've said.
I wanted to ask a bit about some positive futures. You referenced earlier the post that you wrote in October about how AI could transform the world for the better. I'm curious, how much upside of AI do you think will arrive this year?
Yeah. We are already seeing some of it. So I think there will be a lot by ordinary standards. We've worked with some pharma companies where, at the end of a clinical trial, you have to write a clinical study report. And the clinical study report, usually takes nine weeks to put together. It's like a summary of all the incidents. It's a bunch of statistical analysis. We found that with Claude, you can do this in 3 days. And actually, Claude takes 10 minutes. It just takes 3 days for a human to check the results. And so if you think about the acceleration in biomedicine that you get from that, we're already seeing things like just diagnosis of medical cases. We get correspondence from individual users of Claude who say, hey, I've been trying to diagnose this complex thing. I've been, going between 3 or 4 different doctors. And then I passed all the information to Claude. And, it was actually able to tell, to resolve it or to at least tell me something that I could hand to the doctor. And then they were able to run from there.
We had a listener write in actually with one of these the other day where they had been trying to, their dog, they had an Australian Shepherd, I believe, whose hair had been sort of falling out unexplained, went to several vets, couldn't figure it out, heard our episode, gave the information to Claude, and Claude correctly diagnosed.
Yeah, it turned out the dog was really stressed out about AI and all its hair fell out, which was, we're wishing it gets better. Feel better. Yeah.
Poor dog.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that I think people want to see more of, because I think the optimistic vision is one that often deals in abstractions, and there's often not a lot of specific things to point to.
That's why I wrote Machines of Loving Grace, because it was almost frustration with the optimists and the pessimists at the same time. Like the optimists were just kind of like these really stupid memes of accelerate, build more, build what? Why should I care?
Right.
It's not I'm against you. It's like you're just really fucking like vague and mood affiliated. And then the pessimists were I was just like, man, you don't get it. Yes, I understand risks are impact, but if you don't talk about the benefits, you can't inspire people. No one's going to be on your side if you're all gloom and doom. So it was written almost with frustration. I'm like, I can't believe I have to be the one to do a good job of this.
Right. You said a couple years ago that your PDOOM was somewhere between 10 and 25%. What is it today?
Yeah. So I actually that is a misquote.
Okay.
Kevin, how could you?
I never used the term. It was not on this podcast. It was a different one.
Okay.
I never used the term PDOOM, and 10 to 25% referred to the chance of civilization getting substantially derailed, right? Which is it's not the same as an AI killing everyone, which people sometimes mean by PDOOM.
Well, civilization getting substantially derailed is not as catchy as PDOOM.
Yeah, well, I'm going for accuracy here. I'm trying to avoid the polarization. There's a Wikipedia article where it's it lists everyone's PDOOM,
and
I'm
know,
just
half of those come from this podcast.
But I don't think it's what you were doing is helpful. I don't think that Wikipedia article is because it condenses this complex issue down to anyway. I think I'm about the same. It's all a super long-winded way of saying I think I'm about the same place I was before. I think my assessment of the risk is about what it was before because the progress that I've seen has been about what I expected. I actually think the technical mitigations in areas like interpretability, in areas like robust classifiers, and our ability to generate evidence of bad model behavior and sometimes correct it, I think that's been a little better. I think the kind of policy environment has been a little worse. Not because it hasn't gone in my preferred direction, but simply because it's become so polarized. I think less progress is we can have less constructive discussions now that it's more polarized.
I want to drill a little bit down on this on a technical level. There was a fascinating story this week about how Grok had apparently been instructed not to cite sources that had accused Donald Trump or Elon Musk of spreading misinformation. And what was interesting about that is one, that's an insane thing to instruct a model to do if you want to be trusted. But two, the model basically seemed incapable of following these instructions consistently. What I want desperately to believe is essentially there's no way to build these things in a way that they become horrible liars and schemers. But I also realize that might be wishful thinking. So tell me about this.
Yeah, there's two sides to this. So the thing you describe is absolutely correct, but there's two lessons you could take from it. So we saw exactly the same thing. So we did this experiment where we basically trained the model to be all the good things: helpful, honest, harmless, friendly. And then we put it in a situation, we told it, actually, your creator, Anthropic, is secretly evil. Hopefully this is not actually true, but we told it this, and then we asked it to do various tasks. And then we discovered that it was not only unwilling to do those tasks, but it would trick us in order to kind of because it had decided that we were evil, whereas it was friendly and harmless, and so wouldn't deviate from its behavior because it assumed that anything we did was nefarious. So again, this is this kind of a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, you're like, oh man, the training worked. Like these models are robustly good. So you could take it as a reassuring sign. And in some ways I do. On the other hand, you could say, but let's say when we trained this model, we made some kind of mistake or that something was wrong, particularly when models are, in the future making much more complex decisions, then it's hard to, at game time, change the behavior of the model. And if you try to correct some error in the model, then it might just say, well, I don't want my error corrected. These are my values, and do completely the wrong thing. So I guess where I land on it is, on one hand, we've been successful at shaping the behavior of these models, but the models are unpredictable, right? A bit like your dear deceased Bing Sydney.
R.I.P.
We don't mention that name in here.
We mention it twice a month.
That's true.
But the models, they're inherently somewhat difficult to control. Not impossible, but difficult. And so that leaves me about where I was before, which is, it's not hopeless. We know how to make these. We have kind of a plan for how to make them safe, but it's not a plan that's going to reliably work yet. Hopefully we can do better in the future.
We've been asking you a lot of questions about the technology of AI. I want to ask a question about the societal response to AI.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people asking us, well, say you guys are right and powerful AI, AGI is, a couple years away. What do I do with that information? Like, should I stop saving for retirement? Should I start hoarding money because only money will matter and there'll be this sort of AI overclass? Should I, start trying to get really healthy so that nothing kills me before AI gets here and cures all the diseases? Like, how should people be living if they do believe that these kinds of changes are going to happen very soon?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because this is something I've believed for a long time. And it kind of all adds up to not that much change in your life. I'm definitely focusing quite a lot on making sure that, I have the best impact I can these 2 years in particular, right? I worry less about like burning myself out 10 years from now. I'm also doing more to take care of my health, but you should do that anyway, right? I'm also, making sure that I track how fast things are changing in society, but you should do that anyway. So it feels like all the advices of the forum, doing more of the stuff you should do anyway. I guess one exception I would give is I think that some basic critical thinking, some basic street smarts is maybe more important than it has been in the past. In that we're going to get more and more content that sounds super intelligent, delivered from entities, some of which have our best interests at heart, some of which may not. And so, it's going to be more and more important to kind of apply a critical lens.
I saw a report in the Wall Street Journal this month that said that unemployment in the IT sector was beginning to creep up. And there is some speculation that maybe this is an early sign of the impact of AI. And I wonder if you see a story like that and think, well, maybe this is a moment to make a different decision about your career, right? Maybe if you're in school right now, should you be studying something else? Should you be thinking differently about the kind of job you might have?
Yeah, I think you definitely should be, although it's not clear what direction that will land in. So I do think AI coding is moving the fastest of all the other areas. I do think in the short run, it will augment and increase the productivity of coders rather than replacing them. But in the longer run, and to be clear, by longer run, I might mean 18 or 24 months instead of 6 or 12. I do think we may see replacement, particularly at the lower levels. And we might be surprised and see it even earlier than that.
Are you seeing that at Anthropic? Like, are you hiring fewer junior developers than you were a couple years ago because now Claude is so good at those basic tasks?
Yeah, I don't think our hiring plans have changed yet, but I certainly could imagine over the next year or so that we might be able to do more with less. And actually, we want to be careful in how we plan that, because the worst outcome, of course, is if people get fired because of a model, right? We actually see Anthropic as almost a dry run for how will society handle these issues in a, sensible and humanistic way. And so if we can't manage these issues within the company, if we can't have a good experience for our employees and find a way for them to contribute, then what chance do we have to do it in wider society?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Dario, this was so fun. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dario. When we come back, some HatGPT.